Do you know why this thing keeps happening? It's not because you're going to see hospitals opening the doors and people in wheelchairs storming out in order to buy the new Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It's much simpler than that. The reason it keeps happening is because there are people working at places like Polygon that salivate over this, thinking that they're actually helping people in wheelchairs by promoting this mediocre product. So that's why the company does it. It's to get critical acclaim and shield themselves from criticism for their mediocre product. Because a lot of people will tell you that Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 is actually better than 5th edition. And they wouldn't like having to tackle the issues and try to address the criticism because they would require people with creativity in order to even know where to begin to fix the problem. And they don't have people with creativity anymore. I understand they cleaned house. They made the product more inclusive. No room for bigots. A lot of bigots sometimes happen to be also the people that are creative. And the people who are not bigots just seem to happen to be corporate drones that know to do what they're being told, but don't know how to create many things. So what is the problem here? Well, first of all, if you actually speak with people in wheelchairs, and I, as a person who worked at a hospital, can tell you that I had, 99.9% of them have only one fantasy. And this is a game where you're supposed to play your fantasy. Can you guess what the fantasy of people in wheelchair is? It's the fantasy to be able to walk again. So why on earth do you think they would want to play a game where you can be anything you want, and they would just bring the thing that cripples them into the game? Do you think they're proud of it? Do you think they wear it like a badge? Do you think that's their identity? I think if I were to go to a hospital and tell a person in a wheelchair, like, hey, you know what your identity is? Being in a wheelchair. Like, what would immediately happen is that he would start tugging on those wheels in order to get the motion going so that he gets into range and starts pummeling me right there and then. Those people have really strong arms. It's scary. No, it's ridiculous. Because the only remaining part of the demographic, I guess the 0.1%, are probably the ones working at Wizards of the Coast in order to push this bullshit, pretending that this is what their community actually wants. But I missed the survey. I missed the poll where they went and asked other people in wheelchair, hey, do you know what would be cool? If we make this game and you can be in a wheelchair in it. Now, there's another problem with it. It's world breaking. I mean, besides the fact that in Dungeons and Dragons, high fantasy game, you have access to so many spells and so many things that can make a person uncrippled. Like, you can literally be Jesus and just heal them. I think even clerics have access to this spell. But why would the dungeon be wheelchair accessible? Why would the thing even exist? Like, dungeons are supposed to keep adventurers out. So I guess someone went to the chief kobold and said, look, some of the adventurers that want to come in might have wheelchairs. We should make the dungeon accessible for them. Because, you know, we are murderous and we plunder from nearby village and we kill little kittens, but at least we're not bigots. We need to be inclusive here. And then there's something else that really bothers me, and this is something that has to do with new players that like to play Dungeons and Dragons. Eventually you will have a person at the table who wants to create one of those rare characters. You know, the one-eyed, one-legged pirate. The guy that has a hook for a hand. The guy in a wheelchair. Like, the guy in a wheelchair can actually work. It can be a very interesting character. You can play a mage who's crippled in a wheelchair, but he's got like really powerful magical abilities. You can play something like Charles Xavier that does illusions and stuff. It can be a challenge. It can be playing the game on hard mode. But the problem is, and I noticed that a lot of new players get furious with this, but people who are more experienced at role playing don't, is that if I'm the GM and someone comes up to me and says, okay, I want to play a guy with no hands, he's got like 2 hooks. Well, okay, if he wants to pickpocket something while having a hook, and he wants to, I don't know, get some paper, well, pickpocketing requires a lot of dexterity. Like, you need to do a really good roll. Like, I'm actually going to punish him for it, for having hooks as a hand. Because it's a crippling thing. Like, it's why it's called crippling. Because you're not able to use that body part as well as someone that has 5 fingers. And then you can have someone that, for example, can turn into a spider. So now he has 8 legs. He can run faster than a human, right? Like, it depends. So if you're going to come as a person with a disability for their created character, their make-believe character, yeah, I mean, I'm going to role play around that disability. Like, if you're going to want to play the guy in a wheelchair, and this is why a lot of people do not like playing with these types of characters, because it's like, okay, let's go slay the dragon. Let's get into the dungeon. And I, as the GM, will be like, okay, well, your first massive hurdle is a flight of stairs. How are you managing to sneak, but while at the same time carrying your party member that cannot go up the stairs? I mean, I'm the GM. I'm just creating the world, and I'm telling them what they need to do. It's their game. Like, I didn't make their characters. That's the players that get to make them, right? But I guess I would be bigoted if I do that nowadays. Like, this used to be interesting, by the way. Like, creating these characters used to be a very interesting thing for experienced role players. It was quite fun to play the one-legged pirate who has difficulty sneaking because every time he walks, he's like a clunk, clunk, clunk. But at the same time, he could be also very intimidating, right? You take something else, you give it in another direction. It's like, okay, he's very intimidating. The guy with the wheelchair, he's very good at sneaking into crowds, blending in. Like, no one looks at the guy in the wheelchair. You know, everyone just walks by. And he can just sit there and listen to conversations and stuff. Like, that would be interesting, right? But now that's removed. And it's like, okay, well, this is dungeon that's accessible for people in wheelchairs. It's like, why? And by the way, like, this is a role-playing game, okay? Like, you don't have to play it. You don't even have to buy this expansion or whatnot. But it's the direction the company is going. Like, instead of reading the papers, the gaming papers, and finding out cool things about the new feature in Dungeons and Dragons, like learning about some new spells they're adding, maybe some new classes or some new race, or something interesting like that, I find out that they're having a dungeon that is wheelchair friendly. You know, that's the saddening part. Like, they're focusing now on all the wrong things. They're not going to focus on the things that made the game great to begin with, which is getting a party of adventurers and BTFOing some bad guy in his own dungeon, disrespecting the man in his own castle. That's what Dungeons and Dragons used to be like. Now it's like, okay, well, we need to be very sensitive when making the orcs. And we need to be very sensitive when making the dark elves. And we need to be very careful about the language we use at the table. And it's like, already, it's like playing with my mother there in the room. Like, if I wanted to play with my mother, I would not be playing Dungeons and Dragons. I would play Crochet or some shit. Is Crochet? I don't know. You know what I mean. You know, it's just tiresome. And usually when a company starts talking about making wheelchair accessible dungeons, they're kind of done. I mean, their talent has long left the building. It's just not in there anymore. Which is sad, because Dungeons and Dragons was something that I really liked. And it seems that things that I like from American culture are just not there anymore. Comic books, gone. American cartoons, have you watched them? I suppose, like, the only things that are worth watching now are Korean TV shows. When did that happen? When did South Korea start producing better stuff than the country that brought us Hollywood? Anime? Again, like, when did that happen? When did the small nation like Japan manage to have more talent, to sum up more talent than in the United States? Like, a manga, just one manga, not the entire manga industry. One manga sold more than the entire American comic books industry put together. This is how much current day artists, people, have managed to destroy entire industries, and I fully blame the press for it, because they set the tone. You know, the press gets to say this is what the consumer wants, this is what people want, and then they get to judge the developers for their delivery. The people at the top, the stockholders, you know, they read the papers, they don't listen to the customer. And that's what happens. You know, the Polygons, they're the ones that should be held responsible for these entertainment industries just going bankrupt on ideas and then bankrupt on money, because most of these companies are incredibly wealthy due to the success their predecessors had. So it's going to take a while until they actually get bankrupt, but it's going there. And I'm not really that happy, you know, like, I don't want to live in a world without Dungeons and Dragons, but if this is what they come up with, like, this is their best foot forward. You know, this is like literally how they present themselves to the public. Look what we accomplished. Clap for us, you bigot. If you don't clap for us, you're a bigot. And buy our product, because if you don't buy it, you're supporting bigotry. If you buy it, you piss off the bigots. That's literally their marketing now. It's not like, hey, look, we made this amazing game. We're having fun playing it. Why don't you have fun playing it with us as well? That used to be the fucking marketing. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys in the comment section.